I started moving towards Chamandi Hill. You must see this place. And there is a tradition in Mysore. If you have something to do, you go to Chamandi Hill. If you have nothing to do, you go to Chamandi Hill. If you fall in love, you go to Chamandi Hill. If you fall out, you go to Chamandi Hill. I had just fallen out and I had nothing to do, so I started moving towards Chamandi Hill. And I went up and sat on a rock there. Till that moment in my life, I always thought, this is me, and that's somebody else and something else. But for the first time, I did not know which is me and which is not me. Suddenly, what was me was just all over the place. The very rock on which I was sitting, the air that I breathed, the very atmosphere around me, I had just exploded into everything. That sounds like utter insanity. This, I thought, lasted for 10 to 15 minutes, but when I came back to my normal consciousness, I was about 4.5 hours. I was sitting there, fully conscious, eyes open, but time had just flipped in my experience. For the first time in my adult life, tears were flowing down, and I've always been peaceful and happy, that was not an issue, but here I was drenched in a completely different kind of blissfulness, every cell in my body bursting with ecstasy. When I shook my head and trying to get some logical explanation for what's happening to me, the only thing that my very smart mind could say was, maybe I'm just going off my rocker. This experience, as it deepened and it started repeating itself, if I just sit here, what is moments for me seem to be hours for others. I think it's a minute, hours are gone. On a certain day, I happened to be sitting in a certain place. I actually thought it's about 25–30 minutes, but when I came to my normal senses, 13 days had gone by. I was sitting right there. India being what it is, a whole crowd had gathered, garlands around my neck, people touching my feet, somebody wants to know what will happen to his business, somebody wants to know when his daughter will get married. All the things that I hated were just happening around me. And I had to move away from this place just to avoid this crowd around me. And as this experience deepened into me, one thing that happened to me was, everything that I believed was me suddenly was not me. This was always me. And suddenly I found, this is just an accumulation of food that I've eaten. What I accumulate can be mine but can never be me. This was just a huge heap of impressions in my mind. And this body and mind, not being me but just being mine, a distance arose between me and my body, between me and my mind. This also facilitated a certain experience within me, that suddenly the equation of time and space was suddenly not applicable for me. I was seeing that what is here is there, what is there is here. We want it the way we want it. Only one sutra refers to physical postures. Calling yoga either Hindu or Indian is like saying gravity is either Jewish or European. Thing as in reality. In reality, there's just you, me and someone else. If all of us change, the world has changed. If we refuse to change, we will be only talking about it. So when we say sustainable development goals, we are talking about addressing human well-being as 17 different issues which concerns poverty, nourishment, health, women's issues, environment, this kind of things. Essentially, we're talking about human well-being. This is the effort that's going on in the world for a long time. We want to transform the world, but we are not aiming at individual human beings. The world is just a word, it is just you and me. If there is no transformation in you and me, if there is no change in the way we perceive, experience, think, feel and act in this world, how can you change the world? So we can pump in money, we can have projects, they will all go up and go down. But only if we transform individual human beings on a large scale, only then there will be true transformation. This is why yoga becomes a significant thing. I've been to any number of international peace conferences and… Buddhi means the intellect. Intellect, I'm asking you, do you want your intellect sharp or blunt? All of you must choose, I'm going to bless you. You want it sharp. So intellect is essentially like a knife. You use a knife to cut things open. This is the nature of the intellect. Whatever you give it, it will dissect. The entire modern science is coming out of human intellect. So everything is by dissection. If you give this flower to the scientist, they will rip it open and see. If you rip it open and see, yes, of course, there are many facts you will know about the flower, only thing is you won't have the flower after that. And now if you really want to know something, let's say you really want to get to know your mother, please don't dissect her. That's not the way it works. Because see, the whole approach of the intellect is go for the fruit, goal-oriented. No, not the fruit, the root. You nurture the root, fruit will happen. Fruit is a consequence. You're shooting for the consequence without being interested in the cause. That's not going to produce long-term results. Then this is what you will end up with, something that'll work short-term and then that itself becomes a huge problem. Right now, healthcare system itself is a huge problem. The very fact that pharmaceutical industry is the second largest industry on the planet speaks volumes about our health, isn't it? People tell me, I do not know the statistics, these are all things which are being circulated on the internet and things like that. They say almost 37% of the medicine, all kinds of medicines manufactured in the world are consumed by Americans themselves. They don't even account for a minuscule of the population, and if they're consuming 37%, either they're paranoid about their health or really they're unhealthy. One of these things must be true, isn't it? So, we need to look at this. If you want this to enter the medical school, one simple way is, if the medical school can start in some way, we can prescribe a method with which first, one who wants to touch somebody else's body should make some effort to know about his own. Something very simple, need not be like you're not going to spend 12 years in meditation. I'm sure that's not practical for you. But I'm saying at least 12 days. 12 days, everybody can give, isn't it? Totally focused on the inward happenings of what's happening. I can do a simple experiment for you. Are you okay?
Brain off, or we make you unconscious, we put you in a coma. But I think so we've tried to really understand what's happened. And we've done this by doing a number of studies in humans as well as in animals. And so I'll just give you the quick back-of-the-envelope way to think about it. When you take the anesthesia drugs, or when they're given to you by the anesthesiologist, the brain isn't turned off. It's not like all of a sudden a switch flips. If you look at what happens to the brain, it's actually in a highly, highly dynamic state. It's really, the actual circuits in the brain are oscillating. They're creating waves. And to give you some sense of this, if you look at my hands like this, and they're oscillating now, this is the way your brain is in a normal state of, forgive me, consciousness, right? All right? All right? All right? As I understand it in my little limited way, all right? All right? But then what happens is the drugs take over the circuits, and now the circuits oscillate like this. And as long as you keep the drugs there, they're doing that. Now, what does that mean? It means that if this brain area was communicating with that brain area so that you could be conscious, it can no longer do that. When you turn the drugs off, the brain returns. As long as you keep the drugs on it, it does this. It creates these oscillations.
Way in the medical science, if we monitor the neurological system, not just the brain, the neurological system in the body, if we have a way of monitoring that, I think the entire art of anesthesia could raise to a different level at a very minimum interference. It could happen, because why I'm saying this is, there is something called as marma in yoga and also in what is called as kalari in South India. It's a certain form of martial art. Marma is a way of creating killing the pain completely at certain moments when we want to, just by touching certain parts of the body, handling body in a certain way. So essentially what we are doing is, the neurological system, we're shutting it off. Early age, I realized that I did not know a thing about anything. So I started paying… When you truly realize you don't know anything, you start paying attention to everything. So I fundamentally started paying attention to just about anything. Anything could hold my attention. I could spend hours and hours just staring at a speck on the floor. I've spent many weeks just looking at an ant. I don't know if you pay attention to such small things. An ant is a fantastic piece of technology. If you're willing to pay enough attention to it, you will see probably it's the best moving thing on the planet. And as I paid more and more attention, I realized the problem is just in our ability to perceive. Our instruments of perception are not really good enough to know things as they are. Our instruments of perception of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting are good enough to survive. They'll help us to survive. But if you really want to know something, not the way someone has explained it, if you really want to know it for what it is, then you will find the instruments of perception that we have are not good enough to know anything. For example, visually, if you see this part of my hand, you can't see this part of my hand. It's not just about a hand, even if you take a grain of sand, you cannot capture it fully at any time. I spent days, months trying to see if I can stretch my perception in some way. With this, I came to a place where when I was 10, 11 years of age, sometimes I went away into the jungle by myself and I learned to see in the night. Even today, I never ever use a torchlight when I walk in the darkness. I realized that if you raise your attention to a certain level, you can see very clearly where most human beings cannot see. Bear with me because I am very skeptical too. I am a super skeptic about everything because too much trash has been sold for a long time. Really, I'm saying this may upset a lot of people. If you ask 3 questions, 90% of the scriptures on the planet will collapse. They cannot withstand questions. They've always survived saying they come from an authority that you cannot question. Skepticism is good, but suspicion is sickness. Being skeptical means you don't take things for granted. You want to explore and see. But you don't even want to explore, you just want to conclude. That is stupidity, okay? So, one reason why they're going about like this everywhere, which was me also, is because of organized religion, which has imposed all kinds of things on people, most ridiculous things that it doesn't make sense to anybody, but it comes from an authority, so you're supposed to believe it. extreme forms of organized religion you are seeing in some parts of the world. Others have learned to, sugarcoat themselves, but essentially it's the same. The difference between a spiritual process and religion is this. The moment you say, I'm religious, you refer to yourself as a believer. When you say, I'm a believer, in a vague way you're saying, I'm a bullshitter. Yes. When you say, I believe, what you're saying is, something that I do not know, I have concluded. Why do you believe something? Because you are not straight enough to admit that you do not know, isn't it? Yes or no? You're not straight enough to admit, I do not know. What is the problem? What is the problem? What I know, what I do not know, I do not know. What is the problem with this? No, whatever you do not know, you believe. Belief gives you confidence, but without clarity. Dimension of intelligence is most important, this is called as chitta. This is an intelligence without an iota of memory in it, unsullied by memory. See, memory means a boundary. You guys are always dealing with information. Today you're in technology, I think memory does not mean what's here, memory means all over the place. Memory is a boundary. What I know is always a boundary. What I do not know is a limitless possibility, isn't it? We have misunderstood the power of ignorance. Our knowledge is always bound within boundaries. Our ignorance is boundless. So always in the yogic system, we identified with our ignorance, never with our knowledge. This is something we must do in a technology company, because that's where the possibility is. That is where the new terrain is, in your ignorance, not in your knowledge. So, chitta is unsullied by memory, it's just pure intelligence. Right now, if you eat an apple, it turns into a human being. You cannot do it with your brains. Even your brains were created by what you eat, isn't it? There is an intelligence here which is capable of transforming anything to this, because it is making use of the memory in the manas and making this happen. But the most important dimension of your intelligence is chitta. In today's education systems, in today's social conditions, there is no effort to dip into deeper dimensions of our intelligence. We're just too enamored with our own intellect and now using this knife to stitch everything. Recycling and reusing water is no more an optional thing, it's something that we have to do because of concentrated populations in cities. But one most important thing which generally not been addressed in most nations is, as we know, over 70% of water consumption is agriculture. In India, it is 84% is agriculture. Shifting from flood irrigation to micro-irrigation would make a huge difference. But micro-irrigation has its problems when land holdings are very small. So aggregating the irrigation process is an important part of this. Only if we do that, water consumption could come down in a way that it's significant and noticeable. Reuse of city water, whatever domestic water we use, is definitely has to be done, there's no question about that. But micro-irrigation, moving into micro-irrigation, aggregating irrigation process is a very important step that nations need to take.
Well, right now you sit here as a news anchor, and now when you have the power to impact millions of people, now every thought that you generate, every emotion that you generate, every word that you utter, every action that you perform becomes of profound importance. So what I'm saying is, if you were an ant, you could walk upon everybody. If you become an elephant, then you have to walk carefully. So, as you get into positions of power and responsibility, your individual responsibility becomes of paramount importance.
Only miserable people have a long life. If you're joyful, it gets over before you know what happened. If you're ecstatic, it'll go off in a blink. Yes. Now, being joyful is not the goal. It is a most fundamental requirement. If you wake up in the morning, if there is no joy in you, you will get this profoundly stupid question, to be or not to be. Yes? Yes or no? Every life on the planet, you try to catch one little worm somewhere, will the worm think, oh, I'm just a worm, let me die? Do you think so? It will do everything possible to live, isn't it? This is so with every life. So is this true with this one. But simply because human beings have been endowed with a certain level of cerebral activity and most people never learned how to handle this activity, now they're getting these idiotic things about, they're going against their own life. Your mind should serve this life, yes or no? Right now it's turning against. Unhappiness means you have turned against your own life. Depression means you have turned against your own life. Anxiety means you turned against your own life. Stress means you turned against your own life. There is only one problem with you. You just do not know how to handle your own intelligence. This is all the problem, isn't it? If you…
Definitely you must fall in love, no question about it, because this is not for economic reasons, it's for the sweetness of your own life. You must fall in love. But with the Facebook and other things, why can't you fall in love with somebody in China or in Timbuktu? Why it has to be local? I feel localization of money would create a small oasis here and there, it'll never bring well-being to the larger world. If human beings have to get localized, right now I drove from San Jose and I started 2 hours early just to make sure that I'm here on time. And what I see is thousands of cars are moving this way and thousands of cars are moving that way. So people who are here are working there, people who are there are working here. And all we are thinking of is… I was driving in a Tesla, okay? All we are thinking of is producing a car which consumes less energy. We are never thinking of, why is it people who are here are working there, people who are there are working here? Why are they going in opposite directions every day? And either they can move to the right place and create those kind of cities where people can walk to their work or cycle to their work, or people can work there from their home. There's enough technology today that it is not necessary for everybody to go to work. Different kinds of modules can be created where you want to go somewhere, please go, drive. But you want to go to your work, which is an everyday thing. It is not necessary to be traveling 2 hours to work and 2 hours back. And you will see people are driving in opposite directions. They're not going… if the whole traffic in the morning is going one way and in the evening another way, understandable. That's bad, but understandable. Now half the population is going this way, other half of the population is going that way, it doesn't make any sense to me. Localization if education, medicine and spiritual process, if it gets commercialized, that society will go down the drain. I think we are doing this to the entire modern world. All three are becoming commercialized. There is nothing wrong with commerce. Commerce is a transaction of give and take. You give me this, I'll give you that. But there are some things which cannot be handled as just give and take. If you bring this aspect of transaction into spiritual process, into education and into medicine, then it turns ugly, and that ugliness will definitely burn you out one way or the other.
The very idea of transformational leadership, something that we are celebrating this evening. And I have the same question for both of you, and I'll come to you first, Sadhguru. I'm sure you come across leaders from all walks of life. Can you pick out 2 or 3 qualities that you found that truly sets apart the transformational leaders from the rest?
Good evening, everyone.
The most important thing about being a leader is it's not because somebody wants to become a leader, he becomes a leader. That could be in the political space. But in social life and in business, it's because someone is capable of something that most other people are not capable of, he becomes a leader. He is able to see something or do something which everybody else is not able to do. So, the many leaders I've met, when when I have a more intimate relationship with these people, what I find is they're extraordinary people. One reason is they pay attention to detail. Another reason is they have been constantly working on their competence rather than wanting to be leaders. Leadership has happened as a consequence, not as a desire. These are two things I always found with…
Follow-up to that, if we are all in the pursuit of happiness, why do you think it is so elusive?
To be in pursuit of happiness itself is a oxymoron, because whether you experience joy or misery, happiness or unhappiness, agony or ecstasy, all happen from within you, isn't it? When the source of your human experience is within you, when the basis of human experience is within you, you trying to extract it from the world is a silly way to go about. Right now, this is the problem. People are trying to extract happiness from people around them or the world around them. Comes later. First of all, what I've seen is, now a teacher has to, let's say, teach a physics class, the teacher is nervous, anxious. They are reading the book again and again and trying to understand, don't want to make a mistake. I said, no, you will not prepare. You will go there in front of the children, you sit with them, you read the book, make a fool of yourself. It's very important that you make a fool of yourself. A child likes it. Because you are acting like one Superman all the time. No, you come down to their thing and read with them, you understand something, they understand something, exchange this, a very active process of wanting to learn. Children don't want to leave the library and go. At 11 o'clock in the night, they're coming and knocking and saying, please, I want to read this, I want to know now. And this engagement is what makes the difference. And the teachers are like their parents, totally engaged. Parents may not have the time, but these people are completely engaged. I feel the fundamental thing is this dedication and devotion towards that. If you deliver education without the needed devotion and dedication towards what you're doing, I think you will inevitably set up a assembly line. So one solution to scale up, which we are working on right now, is the subject matter, whatever physics, chemistry stuff, get the best teachers and have it recorded, it's already there. From first standard to 12th standard, everything that you need is already there. Subject matter happens on digital platforms. The teachers are just trained for involvement, engagement, for inspiration and keeping the atmosphere very joyful and lively. Teachers are just trained for this, they do not know any physics, chemistry. Physics, chemistry is happening on the video, but the teacher is engaged with the children, learning with them, encouraging them, inspiring them. This is working very well for us.
Today, to welcome someone who lives and works at the cutting edge of a common discipline. Sadhguru, you are perfect examples of our own values, and it is our privilege and pleasure to welcome you on campus today.
Jananam Sukadam Maranam Karunam Milanam Madhuram Smaranam Karunam Kalavashadiha Sakalam Karunam samayadipate akilam karunam. Good afternoon, everybody. So the first question would naturally be, what is that prayer about? It's not a prayer, it's an invocation. An invocation means there is a whole technology as to how to organize your system to do a particular action. As human beings, we do so many things in our lives. You want to run a race, your body, your brain, your energy needs to be in a certain way. You want to meet a friend, it needs to be in another way. You want to do something else which needs your intellect on, it needs to be in another way. Like this, for different types of activities that we perform in our life.
Say you're a leader by any standards, business or otherwise. A leader means you have the privilege of sitting on a perch a little above others. If you sit in a higher place than others, and if you don't see better than others, you will make a fool out of yourself. You have to see something that others cannot see. If you don't see anything new, if you don't see anything fresh that others cannot see, for sure you will become an object of ridicule. So vision is an important part of being a leader, that you're able to see something. Vision does not mean you concocted an ideology. Vision means, literally means you're able to see something that others cannot see. So when you're seeing something, if your vision is seeing something, it will never be in conflict with the existing reality. Only if your vision is from the libraries of great universities in the world, then it may not have connection with the reality in you exist. Otherwise, vision means to see. If you're seeing, how can you be disconnected with the existing reality? But I know where this question is coming from, because for most people their vision comes from books that they've read, or something that they have concocted in their mind because they're supposed to have a vision. Now, vision means to see. I think for ages, we have always credited women being more intuitive or more visionary, for which they were burnt and killed and battered for so many things because they could see something that others could not see. So, a woman has had a… I'm sorry if it sounds bad, I'm only saying it in a certain context. A woman has had a privileged position where she could sit back and look. Man was in the thick of action, not seeing anything. Day-to-day race with somebody else kept him busy that he could not see anything, dust in his eyes. Business leaders and bureaucratic leaders, because these are people who are there for a solid minimum 25 to 30 years. These are the people who can make a difference. So about 8 years ago, we made a list of 2,000 people in India who are business leaders and bureaucratic leaders who will definitely be there for another 25 years in the country doing things that they're doing. They may not be in the news, they may not be up there, these are not photo op leaders, these are real leaders who are doing work on the ground. So, we made a list of these people and said, if we can bring about at least 10% change of heart in them, they can change everything in the country. So we aimed in 4 years' time, we will get these 2,000 people. But now it's 8 years or almost 9 years now. We have touched about 46% of this leadership. They're quietly making a change for sure. They're everywhere today, in the administration, in the bureaucracy, in the business field. All of them making significant difference in the work that how they were working before and how they're working today, with what intention. My main work has been to shift people from personal ambition to a larger vision. Personal ambition is a way of tweaking your desire, you know. People keep tweaking it every year, it gets little more and little more and little more. And this is what is destroying the world. Why are you going in installments? Why don't you have a desire, you know? It's not by reducing desire the world will get better. You just have to increase your desire. Why are you stingy with your desire? That I
said, I think and therefore I am. And we're here in the midst of the incredible brain power of Stanford University and Stanford students that have incredible thinking power. When you think about that and you think about, I think and therefore I am, how does that strike you?
Namaskar. Good morning to everyone. I think this fascination with human thought happened in pre-Renaissance era because that population or that society had seen very dogmatic religious imposition that nobody could think by themselves, everything was already thought and ready in a book. So for the first time, they could think for themselves, breaking loose from that dogmatic oppression. So they felt liberated that they could think for themselves. Since then, I think this European influence has been big and we've made too much of our thought. But what our thought is essentially, it's the data that we have already collected, something that we already know, we bring it out in permutations and combinations of various formats. But essentially, all our thought is coming from the data that we already have. That means no new possibility exists there. The amount of memory that the body carries is phenomenal. Memory is not just that dimension of memory that you can consciously access. There is memory. Memory is the thing which decides who you are right now. It is from this context you're talking about robots becoming just like you because you understand, after all, if you build substantial memory, they'll just become like you and me. Those of you who are thinking of a robotic partner in your life, a robotic wife or husband, it's a good idea because all the time the complaint in this relationship is your partner is not the way you want them to be. So you can manufacture them the way you want. You want them mild when you want them mild, you want them wild when you want them wild, you want them to be turned off when you want them to be turned off. This is a great idea. Yes and it may become a reality. If not very soon, in some time, Mr. Kaku is more qualified to make the prediction as to when So, essentially, anything that you can build from memory can be built.
I think much has been said about this, but still, I would like to bow down to the Japanese people for the courage, resilience and dignity with which they have handled their recent calamity. Most nations would have been shaken to the core by what happened. I consider it truly an honor and a privilege to be amongst you today. Thank you very much. The relationship between India and Japan, as it's been repeatedly said, goes way beyond trade and economics or commerce. I can proudly say the first export from India was the teachings of Gautama the Buddha many centuries ago, and later Kalari, the mother of all martial arts, which has found many manifestations in Japan. These are two enduring and valued exports from India which still continue to live in this country.